Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Crashy, and today we're going to be talking about contracts in esports, and more specifically the kind of like free edgy, free metro movement thing that happened. And I know I'm a little bit late in terms of talking about this topic, but overall I want to give my perspective and my thoughts specifically on the like free metro side, and then I want to kind of segue into a discussion about contracts. For some of you guys, I have to assume some of y'all are younger, you haven't been in like the esports business side of things too much, you really just like kind of follow competitive gaming. That's cool. But if there may come a day when you need to review contracts and start looking at some of this stuff in like a serious light. And as someone that's been in gaming and esports for over 10 years, I've been under a few different contracts. I've had the privilege of, reviewing and having revisions made. I've had the privilege of reviewing contracts for friends that needed a little bit of advice, and I want to go ahead and give you that as well. So first and foremost, I don't have a lot of information on the Edgy situation. Edgy, one of the best players in North America West, is signed to FlyQuest, and from the rumors and the looks of it and the hashtags and whatnot, he's under a not so great contract. So that's really all we can say about that situation. But the Metro situation specifically is pretty interesting, and I did kind of tweet my thoughts about this, but I wanted to go a little bit more in depth, especially just on the back end. Like I said, I want to go ahead and give some advice and some generalized thoughts on contracts in business and esports in general. But the free Metro situation is interesting because it was like a movement that really didn't come from Metro at all. Now you have to expect that obviously friends talk, teammates talk, so the information about one's contract, it's gonna get out to people close to him. There's no way, that even though he's on Atlantis and Benji's on NRG and Mongrel's on FaZe, that they don't all about know what each other make or have at least discussed it to some capacity. And so I'm sure that if he's making significantly less than the other two are, and he's playing in a trio and just being just as successful and as strong at the game in terms of his skill, that it would cause a little bit of resentment in terms of the agreement that he signed. Now, first and foremost, I do want to go on ahead and give my perspective on how Atlantis handled the situation. I think Atlantis handled it very well, and you can't talk about this topic without getting this out of the way. If you are a person or were considering or did or ever going to be the person that goes after staff of the people that are being targeted in a movement or a discussion or a debate like this, and you're going to send them threats and be disgusting and vile, just go ahead and save yourself the time and just don't, because that's ridiculous. These people are working. Not everybody that even is in Atlantis is a part of it. There's no reason to ever solicit violence and be that person. If you want to support somebody. If you want to share your opinion, your thoughts, do that. If you want, what I mean, there's just so many other better ways than to be that low of a person. So just don't do that. First and foremost, we're going to get that out of the way. If you have your opinion, if you want to debate with people, go for it. That's great. So let's go ahead and talk about Metro. Metro, obviously not happy with his contract, and Atlantis came out with a statement, and their statement was really good. Basically what it said is that, they were aware that he wasn't happy with the contract and that they had gone through revisions and renegotiations, and by now, I'm hoping you guys have the specifics. They had been working with Metro. There's no situation where he's under the same contract that he signed on. That's not the case. He's under like a second or a third one, if I remember correctly. There's not a situation where they denied him, the ability to renegotiate. They actually gave him a pay increase in January, I believe, if that was correct. And overall, Atlantis came out with some great information discussing that they are a newer organization, a young organization, and ultimately it seems they can't really offer him the monetary and the financial support that he requires and at this point is worth. So you have to understand how contracts work. Basically, he signed a contract for X amount of dollars per month in salary, and in return he gives up whatever percentage of his earnings and his winnings, most likely, to Atlantis, and this is for X amount of years. Now, the kicker about contracts, the really big part is the term length, and the term length means if he signed a 3-year contract, that's not great, because you have to expect that there's room for the player to outgrow their contract. And not, like in cases like this, in cases like FaZe and Tfue, that's exactly what happened. He outgrew the contract. He outgrew it an insane amount. He got so popular, he got so good, his potential in the game was through the roof, and his performance has skyrocketed. And you can actually go back and look when he was signed with them. He's been signed with them for over a year, and his performances weren't that great. His actual first, I think it was 13th place in the summer skirmish, was the week after or the week of them signing him. So he really started to pop off more recently in terms of his success in the trio with Benji and Mongrel. But he's an amazing player and has been an amazing player, and he just outgrew the contract. So the kicker, the really bad part about this whole situation, is that it's obvious that he signed a contract that was just way too long. Because if you were to sign a much shorter term length contract, that means there are periods where you need to re-sign, and during those periods of your contract running up or expiring, you have the leverage to renegotiate. So first and foremost, I don't know if this is just ignorance on Mitro's part, ignorance on his parents' part, but I am gonna lean in this situation. I'm gonna lead on the side of it being their responsibility to know what they're signing. Now, here's the thing: it comes down to a discussion of ethics versus a discussion about what's legal. Now, is it legal to give bad contracts? Yeah, it is. Now, here's the problem. When the movement starts and people are saying, oh, he's locked in a crap contract and a shit contract, that's all hearsay. We have absolutely no idea what's in that contract. And unless you have insider information, which people that have reported on this said that, yeah, the contract's really bad, I don't even want to get into the speculation of that because I don't have any information. I'm just a person giving my opinion from the outside perspective. I have zero information, and if that's what people are saying, I have no doubt that it's probably the truth, but the point remains. You are signing a legal agreement, and when you go into these discussions, if you think there's even a slight chance that it's not going to go the way you want or that you're uncomfortable with it, just don't sign it. And the crazy thing is, and this is kind of part of the discussion as well, is that in Fortnite, you don't really need an org in this game. The org will provide you salary, but that salary comes at the cost of paying up your earnings, and that comes, it's a gamble. And I said this in my tweet, and I kind of want to elaborate that. A salary for percentage split on your earnings is a gamble against the player's own skill. And the reason I say that is because if you are a very good player, and you're one of the best, hands down one of the best, getting a salary is great because it's a stable income, but you could also just keep 100% of your earnings and be orgless. Now, that's a little unrealistic, I suppose. I mean, there are other benefits to being on an organization. There's, industry connections, there are brand deals and sponsors and the marketability of the organization. So they have other resources, but if we're looking just at the numbers in terms of revenue, when you are a good player, that stable income, that stable salary that you're getting per month is a really good source of income because you're not necessarily for sure that you're going to perform at the very top of the game every single tournament. So the reason I say that it's a bet against your own skill is because if you have a good salary, that's great, but most likely the percentage of your earnings that you have to share with the organization is going to be a little bit higher. So first and foremost, again, this agreement that he has is got revisions on, or got a salary increase on, whatever the case may be, was still reviewed by him and his mother and was signed by them. And so I have to say that the main issue is it could be viewed that, yeah, maybe they just gave him a bad contract and that's unethical, but that doesn't really matter, to be honest, because they were able to review it and sign it. So when it comes to this discussion in esports, I just want to say, guys, especially you younger players out there, being on an org is not the number one priority. Looking out for yourself, performing well in the game, and taking opportunities that are going to help you in the future, not just with the game, but in a career in esports, is most important. So you have to look at the contract, you have to understand what you're signing up for, and you have to ask yourself, do I have the potential to be the best of the best? Because if you truly believe that you do, then you need to make sure that the contract reflects at very least a middle ground between where you are now and where you think that you're going to go. So, some generalized understanding. I do want to, like I said, I wanted to talk a little bit about contracts in general. A contract, I have to imagine some of you guys don't have a great understanding of how this side of esports works. Essentially, when you're a professional player for an organization, they will sign you to a contract as an independent contractor. Now, you are not an employee. They do not offer healthcare benefits or any kind of insurances. It is simply they are paying you and they have a contract with you for your services as a competitive gamer. Now, what this contract means is there will be terms for both sides. The organization must uphold a certain standard, they must uphold certain responsibilities, and the player must uphold a certain standard and certain responsibilities. Usually comes with like a code of conduct. You can't be racist, you can't be saying ridiculous things, you can't refuse to play in tournaments, you can't cheat and things like that. And code of conduct, like ethics code in terms of representing the company that you're playing for under the contract in a professional manner. Now, usually on the player side of things, your expectations are, some companies, some organizations will put, like, you have to create content, you have to be, marketing yourself, you have to stream, 20 hours a week. I've seen these in contracts. And other than that, it's like, you must uphold the code of conduct and the ethics code, you must perform in all tournaments, and you're allowed to go and attend all tournaments that are within reason. Usually the organization will have conversations about what events and what tournaments are expected of the player to go to in terms of marketing and just having them being used as a competitive player to go to these events if they're open events and things. And in return, the player must, be available. They must follow those terms. They must, create content if it's in the contract. They have to stream if it's in the contract. And usually they'll have a section the player must perform in tournaments to the best of their ability. This basically means no going into tournaments and fixing matches, or no going into tournaments and losing a round on purpose to drop into a lower bracket if it's bracket play type of esport and things like that. Now, in return, per month, the contract 90% of the time, if it's a legitimate and a good contract, will offer a salary. First and foremost, I'm going to go ahead and put this out as an almost 99.9% of the time blanket statement. If you're signing a legally binding contract that has a term length at all and it does not have a salary, you probably don't want to be signing that contract. If an organization is offering to give you little tiny things for no salary, then there's really no reason to do anything other than just an understood partnership. There's not really a reason to sign a contract if they're not really giving you something. Now, I guess there are some situations where it would be acceptable to sign a contract for an esport that has a lot of open events, maybe a full open circuit, and say the only way you can get to those events is to sign a contract where they will pay for your event fees and your travel and your board and stuff like that, travel and board. But even then, that could be a tricky situation, because say you go to one of these events and then you pop off and then you're the best team in the game, and then next thing you know, you're locked into a contract that doesn't pay anything. So you have to ask yourself, how much do you think you're worth? And that's what a lot of these conversations come down to when talking to players about contracts. How much do you think you're worth? How much money is going on in the market? What are the average salaries? And these are things that are kind of it's kind of hidden information. It's hard to find out, but at the same time, you have to have a value on yourself. So if you take a salary of X amount of dollars and the percentage split is 50% for 3 years, I'm going to tell you, man, that's probably not a good contract. It's a really long term length. You're giving up half of your earnings every single time you make any money in the game, and you're locked in for, like I said, 3 years. No opportunities. If there's not an addendum that gives you X amount of dates to renegotiate, if there's not a renegotiation period, there's all different kinds of legal jargon and different bullet points in contracts that are not only kind of hard to understand, but they're very, very specific. And sometimes they're very, very vague. You want some specifics in your contract. If it says, hey, there will be a period for renegotiation, well, it's how long is that? When will that period come? So say you sign a 2-year contract, well, maybe you have them write in every 6 months there's a renegotiation period, and XYZ happens if, y'all don't come to an agreement or something like that. For me personally, I've never been a huge fan of signing a contract for more than 1 year, because say you outgrow that contract very fast, worst case scenario, you're locked into a contract for the remainder of the year or for the remainder of a year. And I mean, that's still a long time, but it's not 3 years. You know what I mean? For some of these players that are getting locked into 3-year contracts, I think the first big issue is the fact that they signed a 3-year contract. That's just a long period of time. But I do want to say, in defense of the organizations, it sucks if they're handing out bad deals, but at the same time, everybody needs to read and understand. That's the biggest thing. Knowledge is power, and there is no shame in asking people for help. There's no shame talking to your peers about their contracts, and maybe they're not willing to disclose things, but people are out there that will help you and don't have a problem looking over contracts for you. The biggest fear for me in terms of contracts are there are teams out there that will say, we're looking to sign pro players, and a lot of them are not legitimate businesses. A lot of them do not have contracts, and it's just these kind of fake wannabe operations. And for a lot of you younger players out there, those are the things that I really want y'all to try to stay clear of, and I want you to be careful with, because there are teams out there that are great. They have a big following and whatnot, but in terms of being a business, in terms of esports, they really don't have their feet on the ground, and you just have to look out for yourself. You got to make sure you know what you're signing. You got to make sure your parents understand, at least to some degree, and in worst case scenario, if you need some help, it's not a big deal. If you are a strong talent, if you are placing well consistently, and you are making your name in esports, let the industry, let your performances do the work for you. I kind of urge everyone that is considering or getting offers or being talked to, I definitely urge you to ask for help, to get some legal help to help you review some things, at least to get a different perspective. If you don't understand something, try to understand it before you just shrug it off and accept it for whatever it is. But first and foremost, just wait a little bit. If you're doing really well, there is no rush. Yeah, it sounds exciting to be on a pro team, or it sounds exciting to sign a contract and to be a signed player, but that kind of honeymoon phase of having that title and having that contract on your back, and you know what I mean, all of that's gonna fade, and eventually you'll just be a signed player for X team, and months down the line, nothing's changed for you. You're still a great player, you're still on that same team, but your contract's the same despite your performances. So contracts with percentage splits and salaries, they are a gamble. They're a gamble for the player, and they're a gamble for the organization, because if the organization isn't putting a percentage behind their salary, they're getting nothing from the player. And if the player isn't getting a good salary for a good percentage split, then they may be giving up way too much of their money. So it's like the org and the player betting against the player skill, because the org wants the player to do well, because they want to be able to market them, they want to be able to grow their organization off the back of them, they want to be able to present that player to sponsors and brands in order to pull in more revenue and more income for the organization. But at the same time, they also want their split, because they are paying you a salary. And if an organization is paying you a salary, be grateful for that, because that money is stable. You're always going to make that money. Even if you have the worst month of competitive gaming in your life, you're always going to make that money. But how much of your earnings is that money worth? If you're making $1,000 and you're giving up 70% of your earnings, well, it's going to suck when you start popping off and making hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you're giving up more than you're being paid in salary, because that's just doesn't make any sense. So something to think about. Hope you guys enjoy a little bit of information, and if you guys ever need help, if you want some specifics, I'll do my best. I mean, I haven't reviewed every contract. It's been a while in the industry since I've actually looked at a contract or had one come my way, so the wording may be a little bit different, and some things may have changed. But overall, if you have any questions, if you're, like I said, if you're one of the younger players out there, definitely let me know. You can always reach me on Twitter. My DMs are always open, and I'll do my best to respond to people that have questions about things like this. But I mean, it's simple. Focus on yourself, focus on your gameplay, your content, whatever you're doing, whatever your niche is that has a potential company looking at you, just keep working on it. And I guarantee you that the right team, the right people that have your interests in mind will find you. That's just how it works. So keep grinding. I hope you like this video. Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think about contracts. What do you think about the Mitro situation? Again, it sucks that he may be stuck under a bad contract, but at the same time, it sucks that he signed it to begin with. And I hope that they're at worst case scenario in this situation, because I think Atlantis is handling it pretty well. They're going to go ahead and let him go. So I think they handled it well as they could. They weren't able to find someone to pay the buyout that they required to let him go, but they're going to let him go anyways. I think they handled it really well, and I think that at worst case scenario, hopefully he and his mother learn something about the industry a little bit, because now, make no mistake, he will probably never land under a quote-unquote bad contract again. So let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think about the whole situation? What do you think about contracts in the business side of esports? Appreciate you for checking out this video. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next video.
Do you feel your bones start to shake? Do you feel the earthquake? Do you feel the fire inside of me? Do you see the sparks that I'm setting free? Does the beat take you over? You just